One of our core women-owned businesses contribute to Rwanda's economy by 33%. 33% is quite a significant number for any given economy to invest into. It is therefore our pleasure to be joining forces with Rwanda Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs and UN Women together with BPN Networks in the launch of the business clinics. One of our core founding mandates is to empower women and men in the transformation of their own personal leadership, organizational leadership, but at the same time impacting the economy where they are active. So it is our pleasure to be able to partner with the key institutions that are involved in the business clinics throughout the next 7 months. And indeed, it is our joy to be able to see the growth and transformation of the 30 businesses that will be joining this initiative. Transformation is one key thing to remember when it comes to recovery of any given economy. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to July's edition of Leaders Roundtable. We are streaming live from Kigali Heights at Kora Coaching Group, and today is quite an exceptional day today. Welcome to all of you who are streaming from Rwanda, those who are streaming from Africa, and I know some friends are streaming from all around the world. So once again, welcome to this edition of the Leaders Roundtable. Today, I am joined by an amazing panel of women leaders to discuss quite a topical issue around women in leadership, particularly in this day and age. So allow me to introduce to you my panelists. We have Patience Mutesi Gatera, who is the Country Director for Trademark East Africa. Patience, welcome to Kora Coaching Group.
Thank you very much, Miri, and thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. And we have Mitwa Ngabi, Kayemba Ngabi, who is the CEO of MTN Rwanda.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
Indeed, it's a pleasure. And I must say today I'm wearing yellow because the correct color of all color, unlike some people that we shall not mention. So you can see already that today's panel will be very colorful. Hint, hint. And it's also going to be colorful because we chose this particular topic to address women in leadership issues, particularly with the crisis in mind, because there are ongoing research and surveys that talk about how women-owned businesses are in danger to some extent. I was telling one of my colleagues the other day that I feel like women are an endangered species when it comes to doing business during and post-COVID. And the thesis of that is based on research that we have that say that during and post-COVID, women-owned businesses are likely to suffer more than any other businesses around. So that really has been the basis of us creating this panel to focus specifically on women in leadership. Now, stating the obvious, which is the fact that KORA is owned and led by women by over, I would say, 80%. Yeah. Yes, in our leadership and our team, we are very deliberate about women empowerment. Okay. But that is the obvious. What I didn't know until now is that today is Africa's Women's Day.
Yeah, very interesting. I had no idea. It's been celebrated for what, 58 years, did you say?
58 years.
Yeah.
So our talk is very timely, ladies.
So happy Africa Women's Day.
Happy Africa Women's Day.
Happy Africa's Women's Day. And we do have a number of African countries on this panel.
Correct. We do, yeah.
We do. So that's really awesome. And I know that there are business women and also businessmen logging in from various countries that certainly wanted to hear you ladies talk about this very important issue. So now, as always, we are going to be streaming live and taking questions and suggestions and really any comments that you have on the topic, and also addressing the panel. We are encouraging you to send through your comments. You can tweet, retweet, anything that you like and see, or don't like or don't see. So it's always good to have two sides of the coin, both the yellow color and the red color.
And green and blue.
And green and blue.
Thank you.
Diversity is something that we certainly cherish and value.
Yeah.
Now, I've shared with our audience, and our team has shared with our audience, 2 articles which really are the foundation of today's topic. And those 2 articles address the positive and the negative of women in leadership. So I guess on the negative one, which is the obvious, women-led and women-owned businesses will be suffering a little bit. And some of that, in terms of quantitative data that we receive from the African Development Bank, is that they have surveyed over 1,300 women-owned SMEs in 30 Africas.
Right.
And those are pretty much in danger of extinction if there is no immediate intervention. And that was a research done in partnership with the Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa, AFAWA, and the UN Women, of course.
Right.
So the picture that is being painted here is that we need to do something for women. And I totally agree. And one of the reasons for agreeing is that KORA is certainly doing something also in Rwanda in partnership with the Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs, whereby both PSF, UN Women, BPN, and us, which really are doing something to assist women with anything they need, whether it's from a leadership, emotional intelligence side of things, or the skills or the capacity, financially speaking, so that really we see that turnover keeping, because not only it's a good thing to do, but women are 30%, if not more, of Rwanda's economy.
Right.
So that's quite significant and something that is sizable. So looking at it from a quantitative and financial point of view, we need to save that.
Yeah.
But then there is another side of that coin, which is positive apparently, on the political side of things, where CNN wrote an article around the April time, just at the beginning of the lockdowns around the world, where they were actually saying that women-led countries where women are heads of states are actually faring better than other countries. And the question was, why aren't we seeing more women in leadership positions as heads of states? There are only 7% around the world. So to kick off that, I would like to hear from you, Patience, about, what are your views on the 2 sides of the coin?
Thank you very much, Mireille. First, let me just applaud you for the idea around the roundtable. It's really nice to share ideas with fellow leaders, but also to listen up from everybody who's listening in. Thank you for sharing also those 2 articles. On a daily basis, there's so much research that's being done around women. The facts are out there. We're more than 50% of a population, and yet when it comes to leadership, we have less than 20% women in C-suite. I think Mitra was telling us about her own group where CEOs, the number of CEOs as a percentage of the total CEOs is probably, 10%?
Right.
It's very little.
So it's very low. And yet when you look at it, being 50%, you should, you'd want to see that at that level or at every level, we're actually contributing the same. But what's really happening is that at the lower end of leadership or the the more junior roles, you have more women than men. But as you go up the ladder, then you have fewer and fewer women participating. And so we ask ourselves, what's going wrong?
Yeah.
What's going wrong?
What do you think is going on?
There's plenty, and I think it's very difficult to exhaust this conversation because women are participating in different spheres. So you talked about government. We have women in leadership in government. I think our country is one of the exemplary ones. We're doing a very good job. The cabinet is probably over 50% women. The parliament, local leadership. I think when you go down to local government, there's a bit of a gap. That percentage is being improved. But that's on the government side. And then we have on the private sector side. Trademark East Africa, the organization that I work for, we did an assessment in Rwanda on women-owned businesses. And the database was of about 9,000 female-owned businesses, not just leadership, but ownership. And what we found was that when you look at the large organizations, you only have 1% women-owned large organizations. And the size of the organizations was by the number of staff that are working. So large was defined by companies that are employing more than 100 people.
Right.
The largest number of women-owned businesses, guess where those fell? The obvious. It was micro businesses. Right. So 63% of women-owned businesses, of the 9,000, 63% of those were micro businesses. And I mean, the reasons are, there's multiple reasons. There's so many reasons that we have most of those businesses remaining as micro and not really growing. Several studies have been done, but I could summarize the challenges as they're broad. We talk about a lack of access to finance. That's just, I think, a drop in the ocean. Finance is a problem, but then there's so many other problems. There is a lack of information. There is a lack of access to markets. So there's a lack of, understanding of how do I even start a business? And that speaks to a lot of kind of backward-facing issues around how are girls raised from from the early ages? Are they told about their potential to own businesses? Are they taught about both the hard and soft skills of owning a business? Then finance becomes an additional issue because extra studies have also shown that most women will reinvest, let's say, 90% of their revenues into education, nutrition, health, and so
the community
exactly,
element of that,
which is a good thing.
Which is good.
Excellent
it's progressive for the community.
It is progressive, but at the end of the day, it then holds back the business from moving to the next level. Because the percentage for men was actually 40% of men
are be less.
reinvesting their money into health, education, nutrition, etc. So what that means is that during an era like COVID, if a woman-owned business has to go 2 weeks or a month without trading, guess what's going to happen? They're going to eat away their capital because they're putting it into health for their families and their communities, feeding, etc., and they're taking away from the business. So the sustainability of the business then becomes
lower. So really the expression that, when you empower women, you empower a village is very much true here.
Absolutely.
So on one hand, I guess it's good, but obviously in terms of sustainability for the business itself, it remains micro, which is why it's more than 63%. So by micro, for those who may not know that, are we saying it's one person's business, or how do we define the micro element?
The definition of micro was a business that's employing 1 to 3 people.
1 to 3
So you can imagine that's really small. And then small was 4 to 9, and that was about 35% of the business. a little less than that, 19%
Right.
was small businesses. And then large and medium together was 3%. So
Okay.
as you can tell, the women businesses are staying in the micro and small size. And
okay.
they fail to scale.
Indeed.
Because of that very reason.
Yeah, so we will certainly get to that, but I would like to hear that from totally the opposite side of that. So let's go from micro to multinational to very large, extra large, indeed, and getting larger, in fact, post-COVID. So what's your perspective on the two sides of the coin?
I think the thing that I found interesting about the two articles, and you mentioned how one is positive and negative, but I find actually that they're complementary to one another, and I'll explain why.
Sure.
The AFDB article reminds us, or serves to remind us about the impact that COVID would have had on women, more so than men-led businesses, right? And I think a lot of that stems from the configuration of the world before COVID. It has nothing really to do with the pandemic per se, it's the way the world was before that, you know? And AFDB themselves, they issued a release around the financing gap. So you were talking about financing, the financing gap between male and female-led businesses.
Right.
And for Africa alone, they pegged that at $42 billion. And this was before COVID.
Right.
So guess who's going to have the biggest impact coming into COVID, where recovery of companies is going to be very much hinged on access to finance.
Correct.
It's going to be the women-led ones, you know.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing that we all know, just by general information, is that, you know, typically women-led businesses are of certain industries. So it's the service industry, hospitality, and those, when you think about it, those, when you think about it, are the industries that have been most hard hit during the COVID pandemic. So it seems almost obvious, quote unquote, that women-led businesses would be hardest hit coming out of the COVID pandemic. So that's the AFDB article. But I think the other article, the CNN one, which highlights the positive aspects of women in leadership, especially during crisis, the fact that so many countries across the world that have, you know, succeeded in mitigating the pandemic really well relative to other countries, shows that those countries have been led by women. And you name them, right? There's New Zealand, there's Iceland, there's Finland, there's Taiwan, and the examples are there. And what does that say to me? It says to me that in as much as, you know, the impact would be higher on women-led businesses coming through COVID, actually my expectation or my hypothesis is that they'll be the ones that will bounce back better. Because why? Women, according to the stats,
to what we're saying, the community base,
are much more stronger in terms of the emotional, relational types of leadership, which are able to rally teams around a goal. You know, women actually, like you're mentioning, you know, are the ones that are most likely to probably, you know, lay people off during this period because the businesses are very small, they're eating into the capital, etc., etc. But I almost feel like the women, despite maybe laying off people, will be the first ones to send them a food hamper, you know? Keeping in touch with them, caring beyond the normal course of duty. And I feel those teams like that will be the ones that will bounce back. Of course, facilitated by things like, you know, policy adjustments to support women, things like what you're doing with the business clinics, things like that. I only feel, you know, optimism when I see post-COVID with the policies and all of that supporting women in terms of their bounce back. So that was my perspective on the
So you're feeling positive, basically supported by that. The view is positive. So I'm curious to hear from the viewers online right now. You can go ahead and just really share your views, whether you're kind of in agreement or not with what was said earlier on. So I like to see this sort of a realistic, very realistic, quantitative opinions from Trademark East Africa. But at the same time here, we've got a sort of positive outlook, which is backed by the fact that really the ecosystem that was there before the pandemic didn't really allow us to operate the way we could have and should have, so that we have head starts. So back to you, in terms of the support that you're doing for women. I know that Trademark East Africa is doing quite a bit with the Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs, and I was seeing something earlier on Twitter. Could you share a little bit more with us as to what practically is being done locally in Rwanda that perhaps the audience outside of our country could learn from or could glean from? Because really the reason for the Leaders Roundtable from KORA is an educational program for leaders.
Right.
So we are here as leaders to teach other leaders through our real life leadership walks. So it would be good to hear from you in terms of that.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about that project as well. But as Mitwa was talking, I just felt like maybe my sense of optimism. I'm usually a very optimistic person, but
She's changing.
my sense of optimism may not be as high as Mitwa's, because I truly believe that for the women businesses to be able to bounce back, although I say that access to finance is a small issue among the multitude of issues that they face, I feel that for them to be able to bounce back, there's going to be a deliberate need to re-inject finance into these businesses. And my challenge is that with most of these most of the governments or most of the countries in which that I've been seeing is that the response mechanisms are mostly designed to respond to the larger businesses. And I can understand why that's the reason, because the large businesses are the ones that are employing more people. But I worry that these micro businesses that are mostly women owned, unless there's a deliberate effort to revive them, then there might be a problem there. So my sense of optimism is not
hinged on the policy support and the facilitation of state.
Perfectly stated. And then now back to the support that Trademark East Africa is providing to the chamber. Like I was mentioning to you just before we started, we have actually 2 projects that are aimed at supporting women in business. One of them is in recognizing that most of the women-owned businesses are micro, and most of them are involved in cross-border trade. So we've been working with Profam Twese Hamwe, which is a civil society umbrella organization, supporting women that are trading across borders. Those have been severely affected by COVID-19 because the borders have been closed, and these are businesses that are operating on micro levels, like with a capital of maybe 20,000 francs, in the range of 20,000 to 100,000 francs. They buy a basket of tomatoes or
like the
fruits,
mamas at the market?
Yes, cross the border maybe 3 times a day, sell across the border, come back with their revenues. So you can imagine a border closure, what that means to the business. It's, like you were saying, very close to extinction at this point. So we've been working with Profam Twese Hamwe for a while now, since 2011, and we've seen really improvements, huge improvements in these businesses in terms of their capacity, their understanding of what their rights and obligations are as business women. And then in addition to that, last year we started a project with the Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs in recognizing also that working with the women in cross-border trade, we've kind of left out women in urban trade. So we started off with the mapping exercise that I was telling you about, where 9,000 businesses were mapped to understand where they fall within the large, medium, small, and micro, and we found that most of them were micro, and also did an assessment of what are the challenges they're facing. Like I was saying, multiple challenges, but most of them were really around lack of information, lack of finance, lack of access to markets, lack of mentorship opportunities. So within that project, some of the things that we're trying to do is help through the chamber, first of all, reorganize the chamber, because the chamber, as you can imagine, it's not like a chamber of manufacturing where all manufacturers will fall there. With women, they belong to certain sectors.
A lot of sectors,
and so getting them, the chamber to be organized takes a lot. So we've been helping them to organize themselves. And then in addition to that, through that organization, then working with their members, linking the micro ones to the larger organizations so that they can get mentorship opportunities. And I think the future is bright for most of these businesses.
Yes, I agree. So you're optimistic. We like that.
After all.
After all, with all the facts and figures. So there's quite a lot of comments and questions, I must say. And so we are, as you know, streaming through Iggy Hay. So there's quite a lot of questions and comments coming through from a number of people. And one of them is African women can do great. The panelists are the testimonies. Hello. Or yellow. I think today I'm going to say yellow. So panelists are the testimonies, but mostly they are let down by the families and societies which are historically segregated. I guess it kind of talks about, the structure that we had in place before COVID. So that's great. Now, one question is, how can African women fight back and push those constraints in order to reach their potential?
It's an interesting question, and I think, if we could compare where we are today to 10, 15 years ago, I'm sure you all agree that progress has been made.
True.
I don't think collectively we can say we are where we want to be, but the stats are there to show that progress is being made, right? And I think a lot of that progress has come out of a realization that, an empowered woman, is an empowered community.
Right.
An empowered community naturally spills over into being an empowered country. So slowly but surely it's becoming an important aspect of all countries.
Yeah.
And I do think that speaking more, voicing out our opinions a whole lot more has helped along that journey, and it's something that we must continue to do. I really love panels such as this because, like you said, it lends itself to testimony as to what is possible.
Exactly.
And I always tell my fellow female leaders, and I think we spoke about it, Pesh and I were in a group session earlier in the year with the ladies from MTN, and we're talking about how it's so important that as women leaders, if you have a story to tell, you better tell it,
Yes.
And I find that the more women leaders who speak and enlighten others that things are possible, the more it is believed that it is possible. So I definitely think while we're not where we need to be, we have definitely made a lot of progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have, yes. And we will touch a little bit more towards the end because obviously being a coach myself, empowerment is something that is part of my nature. So we will ask more about your own journey in a moment. There's a question that sort of goes along the lines of what we touched upon earlier on. And that question talks about, COVID-19 will smash so many things, including businesses of young women who mostly carry out small but dependable businesses like food vendoring. Which advice would you give them to keep up with COVID issues?
Wow. That's a very complicated question to answer. I think a lot of businesses are struggling. Governments are going to struggle to find new sources of financing, but the response has to be multifaceted. It has to be from a regulatory angle, from a policy angle. Governments need to be deliberate about their response and supporting businesses. I like what the government of Rwanda has done with the Economic Recovery Fund. My personal my questions, the question that I deal with is mostly around how do we make sure that those micro businesses are the ones that will be be equally supported as much as the large ones. I was just looking at a photo today. Somebody posted something around, they called it the pandemic pool. And in the pandemic pool, you have a mother pulling up one child, and the mother is the government, and then the child that's being pulled out of the pool is the large corporations. And then on the other end, you have a child who's struggling, very close to drowning, and that's the SME. And then under, one that completely sank and has turned into a skeleton is bars and restaurants. So I think that picture really depicted very well the challenge that most people have with response mechanisms, that we might find that in the end it's the large organizations that are being supported. And like I say, there might be reasons for that because they're the ones who employ and it's easier to support them. However, we need to be very deliberate in supporting the small businesses. And then also turning to family and friends to re-inject capital, because the real question is going to be about how do we get capital back into this business.
Agreed. Yes. And then asking, I guess it's easier to go to your bank, to go to, the group you belong to, but also you can ask the person that can give you that.
I was just going to add, as Pesh was talking about the large corporations, the picture you gave, and actually my appeal is actually to them, to members of the private sector, where apart from monetary support for recovery of these SME or micro organizations, let's try and focus also on the core of our services in terms of how we can use that as a lever of support. Right. Let's take a classic example of what KORA has done with the business clinics, right? It's not monetary support that's been injected in there, but 4 entities have come together and said, from a KORA perspective, my expertise is coaching, therefore that is what I'm going to contribute to women-led businesses to aid their recovery, BPN comes in, their forte is entrepreneurship, therefore I'm going to lend the expertise around business assessments. UN Women for Rwanda, they come in and say, my forte is advocacy. Therefore, for the women-led businesses that are part of this program, I'm going to advocate. Right. So my appeal is into the private sector to say, before we shy away from support, because it's always considered monetary,
absolutely,
what is it that you as an organization can contribute? Right. For instance, as MTN, we provide enterprise solutions, not only mobile solutions to individuals. So we said we have a data center that is thousands of square meters. Why don't we offer that for free for a period to SMEs who are trying to get back on their feet in order to recover economically? So that's where my appeal would be as well, apart from what the governments are doing.
Right. Agreed, yes. I saw something on Twitter about MTN's economic recovery funds participation. Right. Could you share with the audience a little bit more about that?
Definitely. So like I mentioned, MTN's support for economic recovery in Rwanda has been twofold actually. Right. The one that I just mentioned about it not necessarily being monetary, we've gone into our own core expertise. We provide infrastructure, therefore, can we waive the fees for SMEs or smaller type businesses to ease the communication costs? Can we house them in our data centers? Can we provide them affordable solutions so they can communicate easier during this period where we know it's going to be a bit tough for them to operate? So that is one side. Yeah. On the flip side, like Pesh mentioned, the government launched the Economic Recovery Fund probably about a month ago now. Yeah. And we as MTN made a monetary contribution into that of 100 million. But even in doing so, to Pesh's point, we wanted to be very specific about where the funds went. So we were very specific in it going towards SMEs. And I think the recovery process is one that's going to be ongoing. Our contribution hasn't ended there. It's always a constant reflection for us. What more can we do?
Indeed. And I can see now that financial institutions are really picking up with that as well, whereby they are working with the likes of organizations we mentioned to really skill up entrepreneurs. To your point, it's not always about money. It's about how do I help a business leader or a team of heads of organizations to think right, to re-strategize, to reinvent themselves, because it's all about thought and leadership. That's one of the articles we published last week, where we believe that everything starts with your mindset. Money, of course, is always needed, but the mindset is right. So if the head, literally just like your head on your body, is turning in the right direction, the rest of the body will also head that way. So creating more support for leaders and head of organizations is certainly something I think we need to see more of these days. And and then take it from there. So now, there's a question from a man.
Okay.
And I would like to address this question. So Simon Mzazi is asking, in the mapping, if most of the women-run businesses are micro businesses, what could be done to change that distribution, moving to small-scale enterprises, medium, and later large?
There's a lot that can be done.
Right.
There's a lot that can be done, and I think for starters, we need to encourage these women-owned businesses to re-inject capital within the business. It's a good thing that they're investing in health, education, and all that. But then we need to encourage them to put money back into the businesses. And then I think there's also a deliberate a need to deliberately hold their hands and provide information to them. For example, whatever kind of business they're in, where can you source raw materials? Where can you, how can you add value to what you're selling? And then how do you help them to even access markets beyond what they're currently accessing? Most of the micro businesses, what I didn't say is that they're involved in trading. So it's micro because they're not really adding value. So one of the areas I think we can help to help them move to the next level is organize there's many small businesses into cooperatives. So for example, if it's a woman business that is trading in maize, how do you then bring them together from different regions into a cooperative? It helps them to scale, but then it also gives them an opportunity to add value, then help them to get to the next level where they can buy machines, invest in flour processing, packaging, and then slowly you're helping them to move to the next level. I say helping because I believe sometimes you're constrained just because you don't know what's out there. You do things because that's how you've seen them being done all your life. So sometimes there is need to actually hold their hand and show them what is possible. And that can be done through mentorship opportunities.
Absolutely. So I would like to shift gears a little bit. So it started with newsworthy, topical conversations, clearly with regards to where we are now. But let's now bring back the topic to women in leadership in the context of culture. So what can we as women leaders, because we are at the head of our organizations, whether owned or just leading, we are in charge of the people we are leading. So that also means that we have the responsibility for the culture that we create in our organizations. So can I talk a little bit more about corporate culture when it comes to diversity? I hear a rumor in the market in Rwanda that MTN has got something quite interesting for women leaders that recently was started by the first female CEO of MTN in Rwanda. Could you enlighten the audience about what MTN is doing, really to shift that culture and empowering women to really think about moving up the career ladder?
I'll do that, but maybe just to give you a bit of genesis as to why we have the structure that we have. One of the things that I tend to challenge business leaders, both male and female, is to try and be a bit more self-aware of what I will call that gender positioning is. I think generally, as people, we understand what the general gender bias is that exists in society. So we know generally that there would be a gender pay gap, and for Africa this has been pegged at about 30 to 40% of individuals at the same level getting paid differently. We also know, like you mentioned, earlier in the talk, that females tend to occupy the lower levels of the organization, and as you go up, there are fewer women up there. And these are things that we generally know. But what I also like to challenge leaders of organizations, how much of that do you know of your own organization? When you put up your organization in the mirror, are you able, off the top of your head, to tell anybody who's listening, I have X number of women at X levels, I'm aware of, maybe not happy about, but I'm aware of a gender pay gap that exists. And it's been there, like you said, it's not something that can be exhausted in 1 hour conversation, but the reasons are many. But at least I think the first step in terms of trying to improve anything is to be self-aware of where you stand today. So that was the thinking around how we came up with what we call the Women Empowerment Network. We net within MTN Rwanda. And for us, the thinking was, apart from us being aware of the stats, it's not so much the stat as it is what we can do to improve that. And my challenge to the women within MTN Rwanda has always been, without focusing on the statistic, can we address why is it that women are not there? So is it an issue of self-confidence? Is it an issue of exposure? Is it an issue of, relationships and things like that? So that is where the focus has rather been. So last year we gave birth to the Women Empowerment Network. It's really fun. We have a female president and they have a committee, and their sole mandate is to create an environment where it's a very safe space for women to exchange, but not just only a safe space, but an environment where women can challenge each other and build each other and call each other out in terms of their own developmental journey. And this committee or network within MTN has every quarter a theme on which women focus. So at the beginning of the year, it was about how women excel. And that's how we had Madam Pesh Mutesi coming to speak to the ladies about her own leadership journey, and people learn and glean from that what they can. Coming to the second quarter, it was about how women deal with their finances. So we had, for example, Dr. Monique from the Central Bank coming in to speak about finances and things like that. And then this quarter, it's all about women exploring opportunities. They're doing things like CV CV writing clinics, you know,
Very
mock
nice.
interviews.
That's
So we want to
great.
deal with the issues that would prevent the change of the stats as opposed to focusing on the stat.
True.
And that's what I think is culminating into something great. And my challenge to the ladies is that it's not so much about,
Yeah.
you know, developing yourselves for MTN, but it's about developing yourselves for yourself.
Holistically,
yourself.
as a
Yeah.
person, yes. As you speak, you actually remind me of my own journey before I returned to Africa 5 years ago. So I remember when I used to work in Dubai, I was tasked to create a women's network at Thomson Reuters, where I used to work, and we had over 100 and something women
Yeah.
in the Middle East and Africa. So those type of culture of diversity and inclusion, I guess, are very good. We see that more and more of in developed economies. But I wonder how many companies like MTN are doing that in Rwanda. What do you think could be done differently in Rwanda?
A lot can be done differently.
Yeah.
And I think I really like the point that you make around self-awareness.
Yeah.
And the reason why you'll have organizations such as MTN doing transformative things like the women
Empowerment
yeah, women empowerment, the WeNet, I think is because you know what the challenges are.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem with having it's not a problem, by the way. Men can continue to lead. It's a good thing. But unfortunately, we're not as aware as a woman
Right.
would be on the challenges that women face. Some of the reports a lot of the reports show that there's actually no difference between the skills and the capacities that a woman and a man have. But it's tiny things like how much would you say that you're an effective leader? I could be as effective as my male counterpart, but when it comes to rating, I will definitely rate myself much lower.
Little bit
Right.
lower
And
because
that,
of the
in
confidence.
actual sense,
Yeah.
is a reflection of confidence,
Right.
like you said. So having women networks like that actually helps people to remind them that, listen, you're actually good enough. You
Yeah.
can do this. But somebody, unfortunately for us women, somebody
Yeah.
actually has to come in and remind you that
Yeah.
it's possible. So I believe that one of the things that can be done to change the narrative is actually
Agreed.
deliberately get women
Yeah.
leaders. Not necessarily, it doesn't even just have to be a CEO, but have more women at the table. And it has to be a deliberate effort that you make to have more women at the decision-making table.
I agree. And as you talk about self-awareness and confidence, really in our world of coaching, we call it affirmative, so affirming yourself.
Yeah.
So you need someone who can be your cheerleader to some extent, but also someone who helps you to be the mirror,
Yeah.
where you can affirm yourself so that you can build that confidence
Yeah.
that makes you feel like, hey, I can do anything that I set myself to do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that can rate myself a little bit higher.
Yeah. Speaking
Yeah.
of mirrors and what can be done better, actually 2 weeks ago I had a call with the Gender Monitoring Office. You know this initiative that they've kicked off now where they're trying to get the Gender Equality Seal
Yeah.
certification to private
Private
members of the
sector.
private sector.
Right.
And what that does is it just puts up a mirror to the organization, say actually when you say you're gender equal or you're pursuing gender equality, how well are you doing? So I think for Rwanda we're definitely on the right track for as long as we all participate in this program that they're running.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's one question around that very same topic. I think it talks about what women can do best to empower themselves. So one question is, as people who have made it through and built some good careers like us here, what do you think is lacking in other women to reach their potential?
One of
Your
the
body language
things,
says-
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of lack. Is it lack or awareness, like you were saying, you know?
Yeah.
A lot. And one of the things is really that belief in yourself.
Yeah.
It starts off with how much do you actually believe in yourself? How much are you willing to push yourself? Unfortunately, we find ourselves in an environment where you keep yourself within your comfort zone. So I believe one of the things that really has to be done is we need, including myself, by the way, we need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone more and more. I think we're not very good at doing that. But also that takes women that have been able to achieve a little more than others, being deliberate about picking out people where you see potential, actually step out. I am where I am because somebody actually came to me and said to me, Madam, I think it's time to get out of your comfort zone. It's time for you to take the next step. I remember that very well in 2005, probably my first job. Yeah, my first boss.
So you had someone who called you out.
She called me out. She called me out. She said, you know what? I think you've outgrown this job. I think you need to move to the next step. And that meant actually leaving the organization where I was working. Credit to her, because I would probably still be in that same place. Yeah. And because of those words, I've been more conscious about, okay, I think it's time to leave this place. I think I've given what I can, I've got what I can, time to move to that. So sometimes it means really people in leadership position going out and picking out people and telling them, exposing them to opportunities as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
So
I totally relate with that. I mean, I look back at my own journey just in answering that question as well to say, you know, at what point did it change for me? And similar to your 2005 incident, I had a 2014 one where, you know, through the people you're surrounded with, you know, now I can call them mentors and coaches, but at the time, it was just people that I typically asked for advice from, you know. Yes. And I remember this one conversation that really hit me like a ton of bricks. And coming into that conversation, the question that this mentor asked me was a simple four-worded question. And he asked, you know, Mita, where are you going? You know? And it's funny, it sounds like a very simple question, but I promise you in my own leadership journey, as I've interacted with people, there are very few people who actually have clarity in their ambition. And when people ask me, you know, so how can I further myself? How can I grow? How can I develop? First thing I always ask is that, do you know where you're going? Without a destination, you're not going to get there, you know? So, you know, name it, call it, I want to be chief of X, or I want to be a CEO of my own company, and you'll be amazed at how all the experiences you expose yourself to will be leading you in that direction. It also makes you, I think, a bit more self-aware. If I want to be a chief of X or a manager or whatever the case may be, where am I today? And it makes us really, really aware of the gaps that you have so you can build upon those areas to eventually get there. So clarity of ambition, I think, is super key. And it's funny, in our African culture, well, this is not how we're raised, right? In our culture, say, you know, be humble, be, you know, meek.
Totally the opposite.
But, you know, I give the complete opposite advice, you know, speak to the women within MTN. I said, you must never be shy of ambition, because without that, you'll never get where you want to go. Yeah.
That's true. And as you were sharing your journeys, it kind of reminds me, you know, of where I was in 2007 as well. I was starting out in London. I was working in London at that time. And there was a man. In fact, it was not a woman. It was a man who apparently saw fire in my eyes. Up until this day, I'm like, what did he mean? What kind of fire did I have?
Were you angry?
That's probably what we're seeing now as well.
To your point, I had the very same thing where he kind of deliberately invested in me. He gave me books that I needed to read about sales, cold calling, and all of those things, because he saw something potential in me that I didn't know I had. But because someone really invested in me and made sure that I work and I'm accountable to him, you know, I am where I am because really of that man, not a woman. Now, I guess now the question would be, what can women leaders do to help other women become more leaders, whether it's in the private sector or any other sector?
Yeah, I think Pesh made the comment earlier about I wouldn't even say honest, but the obligation that there is on leaders. And to be honest, I wouldn't only say female leaders, right? I think both male and female. Knowing the gaps that exist, being a bit more deliberate about raising leaders within organizations or companies or whatever the case may be. And I think, you know, to the point that you made about being deliberate, I think Rwanda is one of those really good examples where with deliberate intervention, it can completely shape the face of cabinets, you know, it can completely change the face of organizations and things like that. So a lot of deliberate intervention, I think, will help from leaders. But beyond that, I think telling our story, and I'm a big advocate for this, because through your story, and I tell my people all the time, you know, I spray and pray, you know, I speak to hundreds of people, and if my story touches even just one, then my work is done. Because through the many, many times that you tell your story, so many different people will be relating with different parts of your story, and they'll be seeing exactly where they are today in the various aspects of your own journey. So telling your stories is something that I am a huge supporter of, and I love to create a platform where people like Pesh can come in. Maybe we'll have you, Miriam, as well, come in as well. And I'll really encourage other leaders, not male or female, other leaders to do the same.
That's right.
I like that point.
Pray
Yeah.
and spray. Was it pray and spray?
Spray and pray.
Okay.
I love the point.
Tweetable one.
Spray and pray and
Pray
pray.
and pray.
Yeah.
I really love your point on
Yeah.
telling our stories, because I feel that that's where, as much as we've seen the leadership, the gender balance in leadership improving, especially in Rwanda, we're not very good at telling our story.
Yeah.
We have a very reserved culture, very, you don't want to spray.
Yeah, you want to be perceived as boastful.
Blended,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
But I would like, I really love the idea of, because when you're telling your story, it's not about you.
No.
It's about the people that are going to be encouraged by what you're saying. So I always have this conversation with my peers, my friends, and I tell them, listen, you're not doing it for yourself. Don't be shy. You are encouraging young people, because a lot of the younger people are going through similar challenges and they just don't know how to get out of it.
Right.
That's right.
So go out there and share.
Really,
Absolutely.
It
to
is.
say, hey, if we can somehow,
So
you
can
can
you.
also.
Yeah.
And nobody
Yeah.
is perfect. We are also growing. I was
Yeah.
telling a group of the youth last weekend when I was speaking at a TV show, and I was saying to the youth that yes, you may be looking up to us, but that's probably because we've been doing this for 20 plus years. But even all of us, nobody has arrived.
Yeah.
As long as we
Absolutely.
have breath,
Yeah.
we are all on a learning journey. That's
Yeah.
why leadership is usually called a journey.
Yeah.
Because it's one step at a time that you grow into your leadership. Now, we've got 7 minutes, and
wow.
I would like, I know,
So fast.
Time has
so
flown.
fast. When we're having wonderful conversation
go.
over coffee, and the whole world is just watching, right?
Eavesdropping.
Now I'm leaving the room to speaking. So we've got about 7 minutes, and in the last portion, I know that there are women from various countries in Africa and outside of Africa watching, and I know for sure that looking at the stats of our population on the continent, there's more than 50%, if not 60%, of Africans, not just young girls but also boys, that are watching and really wanting to become Pesh of tomorrow, Mitwa of tomorrow, and other people of tomorrow. So I guess what can they learn from your own journey? If you can maybe share briefly your highs and lows and what you could have said to yourself 10 years ago when you were starting up.
Yeah.
What do you think they should learn?
I always say,
Sure.
I usually start that. I usually start out by saying a lot, but you obviously can't say everything. I think my first word of advice would be just put yourself out there. Put yourself out there, because don't constrain yourself with the lack of belief in yourself. Put yourself out there, push the boundaries, get yourself to do things that you haven't done before, because it's out of those things that you're going to grow. I like what Mitwa said about every little journey leading you to your destination if you're very clear about what you're going to do, but or where you want to go, but you have to be deliberate about pushing the boundaries. The other thing is look around you and ask yourself, am I surrounded with people who will show me who are helping me get where I want to go? So surround yourself with the people who are actually going to help you get to where you want to go.
There's a statistic that says that you are like the 5 people that you are surrounded with.
Exactly.
They are the mirror of who you are.
Yeah. And isn't it actually the hardest thing to do? It's very difficult, especially as women. I think we're fairly loyal people.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to change your circles. But look around you and ask yourself, is this where I want to go? Are the people around me helping me move to the next level?
Yeah.
And then the third thing is really excellence. And with excellence, I mean, first of all, having responsibility and knowing that, taking responsibility for where things go wrong. And by the way, do not fear to fail. Just go for it. And where you fail, make sure that you're learning from it and take responsibility for where things go wrong. And just stand for excellence. Whatever small task that you have before you, if you are a cleaner in an office, do that. Because it's out of that excellence that you're going to move to the next level. Yeah. If you're a cashier in a bank, do that excellently. It will make you move to the next level. Stand out with a little task that you have, would be my last piece of advice.
I love that. So pay attention to the people you're surrounded with, certainly those who speak positivity into your life rather than the negativity. So that's good. And be excellent in whatever you do. As you were speaking about that, I was thinking about my nail therapist here in Kigali Heights downstairs. I wouldn't go to anybody else but her because of that very same point. I know that she will do her job to the best because it's within her, it's inherent. Thank you for that. So what would you say to the 20-year-old self, as Oprah would ask?
No, I think for me, again, going back into my own career, it boils down to, again, being really clear where you want to go, what you want to be. And if you don't know the answer to this question right now as I'm speaking, that's also okay, but be deliberate in finding out what that answer is. Because again, for as long as you don't know where you're going, I promise you you're not going to get there. And with clarity in where you're going, be also very self-aware as to the things that you are and the things that you are not today, so that you can be deliberate about building those capacities and exposing yourself to those kind of experiences that will eventually get there, that will eventually get you there. And the reality, like you said, is that on this journey, there'll be highs of highs and also very lows of lows. And what you see of the successful women sitting around this table and even beyond is only the successful part. You don't see, all the failures, all the restarts, all the fail starts and all of that. And typically when we talk about our leadership journeys, we don't talk about that part. We talk about how I progressed from A to B to C, eventually up to Z. But the reality is that during these leadership journeys, there is a lot of failure. And if I was to talk to, Mitwa 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'd be like, girl, embrace that failure, because for as long as you're not failing, I promise you, you're not progressing. There's that famous saying, right? So if you're not failing, be sure that you're not doing anything, So actually failure is a good thing, because if you fail if you fail one more time, it's one less thing that you don't know how to do, you'd have learned from it, So for every failure, it should be a lesson. And keep pushing, keep pushing. Like you said, nobody has it really figured out, eh? Everybody's everybody's just learning, living and growing, and that's what we should do.
That's beautiful. Wow.
The first point that you make about being clear about where you're going is really in knowing your why. Why are
that's
you
what it is.
What is it that keeps you moving? And I think that helps you really.
Absolutely.
Definitely. When you know your why, you know where is the where you're heading towards. So
it helps you to figure out the how.
That's right. And the what exactly. So all of the questions are answered. So there's only 1 minute remaining. I wish it was a little bit longer. So I guess I will have
I think it's just an excuse to come back.
For
sure.
Maybe
around 2.
Back, we'll talk about our failures, right?
Maybe we should.
So what we did wrong that people can learn from us on our leadership journey.
It's the most important part in the story that you're sharing, actually.
So as we close, firstly, allow me to thank you, ladies, for taking your time to really come and talk to the audience, because I know you've got a heart to empower women, to empower leaders personally, but also because of the organizations that you look after. So thank you for taking time. I know it's a holiday in Rwanda and actually in some countries around the world. But as we close, I would like to close with the words that I heard yesterday. Yesterday I was invited at a CNBC Africa panel with a fellow women leader who is in human capital at BPR, Judith Mohangewa, and there's something that she says toward the end in her closing remark that I would like to reiterate. She said that this is a time that is really good for us to redefine ourselves, to reskill ourselves, but also to reposition ourselves, because it's once in a lifetime opportunity around the world to truly think about holistically who you are, what you want to do, and whether what you are doing is truly what you want to do. So it's appropriate for all of us watching to think about redefining, reskilling, and repositioning if we are not in the right place. So COVID can have a positive aspect to our lives right now. So as you do that, I would like truly for you, the audience, to think about your journey from today and in the next year. Where do you want to be? Who do you want to surround yourself with? And to do that, there's quite a few invitations I'm going to give to you. If you are a woman leader or a leader in general, think about having a coach or having a mentor that can help you think through a few challenges that you have now. So get a coach, but at the same time, for those who truly want to become coaches to others in a professional manner, I would extend an invitation for you to become equipped and become professional coaches through our academy. And in fact, we are launching a next semester in August here in Kigali, but also online. If you are outside of Rwanda, we do have online courses and semesters starting in September. So you'll be equipped. You have leaders that are here to assist you, but at the same time, coaches and mentors that will be there to be your mirror so that you can bounce back those limitations or any thoughts that are not right. So I wouldn't end without thanking our partners at IGIHE. Thank you for your partnership, but also Axiom Network for streaming live. So we appreciate your partnership. Stay tuned for the next edition, which will come back end of August. Until then, stay safe and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Very good. Thank you. Great.
Good job. Well done.
Good job. That was...
Women-owned businesses contribute to Rwanda's economy by 33%. 33% is quite a significant number for any given economy to invest into. It is therefore our pleasure to be joining forces with Rwanda Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs and